well, Patterson. I'm so glad you could join me. You're actually in my makerspace that I call the doodle hole. This is where I get my inspiration to create amazing courses like Decoding Dr. Dre, Hip Hop Entrepreneurship, and Hip Hop Informatics. This wall is what I call going from static, meaning taking data and making it informatic, looking at ways to inspire new technology, new entrepreneurship opportunities for young people looking to find their way. The Ghetto Genius Paradigm represents this over many genres of music, from funk, of course, to soul, R&B, and ultimately becoming the foundation of hip-hop culture. But none of that could happen if the repurposing of technology didn't happen with these items right here. 2 turntables, a mixer, and of course a microphone and audio components. And so we'll talk about that in this TED Talk, and we'll talk about new ways to make that happen and to connect with young people today. So stick around. I'll see y'all in just a minute on this TED Talk. Peace. You know, it's exciting to be out here with all of y'all, but let me first correct a couple things. I used to be the Associate Director of the African American Culture Center, but I took that cultural wealth that has been the legacy of the African American experience here on this campus, where I got a chance to broadcast hip hop, and I made that my trajectory to be where I'm at today, which is in the College of Engineering and Technology Entrepreneurship. Because people always ask me, how did you get hip hop in the College of Engineering? And it's based on that phrase right there. Look at what hip hop can do. Dr. Dre sold a company for $3 billion to Apple with no technical degrees, but he had the cultural wealth of the lived legacy of something I call the Ghetto Genius Paradigm. Dr. Dre is a supernova within that particular context, that particular Ghetto Genius universe. So today we're going to really explore and have a conversation about this idea of cultural wealth, what that means, how I became a connector in the Ghetto Genius universe, how universities, how schools, how businesses like Apple, like Dodge, have used the cultural wealth of Ghetto Genius to build new products, and then how you can become a connector in this space that we call the Ghetto Genius universe. Now, what's interesting is when you really think about Ghetto Genius, it's really beyond hip hop. It's really looking at this particular piece, right? It's not what hip hop can do, because hip hop is just a component of Ghetto Genius, right? It's about what Ghetto Genius can do. It's about the lived experiences of people that have to iterate every day because of their lived situations. It's about knowledge acquired and born because of that lived particular situation. It's about that space, that place and time that motivates, that inspires people to iterate because of their particular situation and their particular circumstance, right? So I want you to close your eyes for a second. Come on, everybody, just go and close your eyes, right? I want you to think about what that must feel like to be in a ghetto. I want you to think about what that must have been like in the 1960s and the 1970s, right here in the US, right? Think about that now. Open your eyes and think about every day if you're walking past items like this: abandoned tenement buildings, broken down cars, right? Barren lots with garbage and rubble everywhere, limited municipal resources, all of these things that make ghetto life be what it be. Defunded education and after-school programs, right? But think about that particular situation, that same thing, that becomes your classroom, where people just don't sit by and get pissed off. They do something about their situation. They start iterating. They start creating new culture, right? They start creating things that now is represented and respected all over the world. Things that are celebrated because of what they decided to do about that chaotic situation, those poor policies that were insensitive to their particular lived situations. They did the damn thing because of that, right? And so we got a chance to see what this thing was like. And I'll never forget, for someone like me, when hip hop came into my life, when Ghetto Genius was celebrated. 1979. I'm right here. I'm a kid from right here in Champaign, Urbana. I played on this campus my whole life. I remember when hip hop came to Champaign and actually was in the halls of Urbana Junior High School, and this big kid named Kane Beaumont, this white kid, he had this boombox radio, right? And he comes bumping down the halls, and he got Rapper's Delight on the box by the Sugar Hill Gang. Straight up disrupted the whole classroom, the whole hallway situation. I was stunned not only because the song was on fire, number one, right? Song was hot, right? But the boombox, the technology was banging too, right? The disruption that it caused with teachers being pissed off, I was with it. I was like, okay. I said, I gotta do that. I have to do that. And it kept showing up. This DJ from Philly named Disco Rat came to Douglas Park in a red step van with a mouse on the side of it with these huge headphones in Douglas Park, and he started rocking my park for days. And I was like, oh man, here it goes again. Here goes this hip hop thing going. Here's this ghetto genius from Philly doing the damn thing in the park, and I want to be down, right? One guy did it better than everybody else, or they expanded what that was. His name is Grandmaster Flash, right? I had a conversation with Grandmaster Flash about coming to the U of I several years ago because I knew that Grandmaster Flash was a geek. So I called him up. I'm like, hey, man. I'm like, you a geek, ain't you? He said, how you know? I said, man. He said, no, actually, I'm a scientist. He said, because I'm the kid that wanted to know why did the light come on when I plugged it in the wall? I wanted to know why the record spun when my parents' platter dropped, when the needle dropped, right? I wanted to know. So he started doing some things that was amazing. He started disrupting with sound like this.
You say one for the trouble, two for the time. Come on, girls, let's rock that. Told me everybody's side. DJ spinning, I said in my mind. Flash is back, flash is back, flash is fast, flash is cool, Francois, c'est pas flash and a two.
I'm like, why is he scratching the records? Why is he stopping the jam, right? Man, we was on the floor dancing, and then he stopped the record again, right? Right? Chopping it. Come on, man. Right? I'm like, how's he doing that, right? Where's this genius coming from that's wrecking shop like this, right? Why is this kid that had this music in his ear doing this, and how's he doing it with no music skills, with no funding from programs that were now being cut, right? So again, Grandmaster Flash, like many of us, were on poverty program kids, right? Meaning the Johnson administration, after the civil rights movement, started having all this funding for programs to make certain there were opportunities in spaces like Douglas Park and the South Bronx and spaces like that, that people could have an opportunity to build within that particular context, right? And so I got a chance to spend time after school in spaces like Play-Doh that was developed right here at the University of Illinois showed up in King School, which is right down the street from here. And actually, a friend of mine named John, who's in the audience today, where he and I would run up after school. We're in 6th and 7th grade. We run up after school, and we want to get to the Play-Doh terminals because there's a math program there that's a dragster, and we can race each other, but we can learn math concepts at the same time. Had no idea the College of Engineering had put that together, but because of that funding, because of National Science Foundation being part of that, they put that technology in my community, and it made a difference. It made a difference to me, right? I was excited about that. But guess what? One day, that changed, right? One day, that funding was shut down because of Reaganomics. Now, President Reagan had a different idea about government spending and what should happen, and it wasn't kind and it wasn't sensitive to folks that looked like me, to my neighborhood. I was used to having programs like the Douglas Center Drum Corps happening in my community. I was used to having movies in my park and dreaming about being in the drum corps, watching the movie, playing softball, doing all these things where I saw folks in my community rising beyond our marginalized spaces, right? See, because Joe Madison talks about the ghetto being a place where you're underestimated, undervalued, and marginalized, right? And so I think about that within my own context, within my own lived experience. So then you have things that are happening where now I have to figure out how to make something out of nothing. I was upset that these programs didn't exist anymore. I was pissed at society. I said, darn. I'm like, why is that happening in my community? Why me? So I'm mad. So I have to begin trying to figure out how to make something happen, like like Jam Master Jay, or better yet, how Grandmaster Flash was doing his thing, right? So I started getting equipment any way that I could, but the way I was doing it was the wrong way. So 2 years after I graduated from high school, I went to penitentiary. Went to penitentiary for 2 years trying to figure out what my ghetto genius meant, right? That was chaos for Reaganomics to shut down those war on poverty programs and have nothing in place that would provide a different way for me to figure out what to do with this genius that it was inspiring me. I had to iterate, I had to figure it out that on my own. So here's what I did. While I'm in Fort Gallery in Joliet Correctional Center, and we've seen Joliet Correctional Center, it's kind of like where James or Jim Belushi and the Blues Brothers got their claim to fame, right? I was on Fort Gallery in that particular space. I started signing my name, William Patterson, PhD. I was 18, right, in that particular space. I began thinking about that chaotic situation. I was living with murderers. I was living with gangbangers. That was not my particular situation. I was a ghetto genius, and I was going to figure my way out of that particular situation, so that's what I did. My wife, who was my girlfriend back then, still has my letters when I was signing my name, William Patterson, PhD. And so I look back at that particular experience. Then I knew that there was something else waiting for me because these guys showed me something very different. So y'all stand up a little bit. Stand up. Stand up. Come on. Stand up. Put your hands together. Come on. Come on. There we go. Right? Right. Okay, they talking about it, right? People going, right? Don't ask me why, right? All we know it is like that. That's the way that it is, right? Think about that beat, y'all. Keep it going. Come on now. Yeah. I was pissed. But we had the box rolling, right? It's like that, and that's the way it is. Hood. All right. That's Ghetto Genius, y'all. Woo. I had that and I knew that was real, right? Run DMC came in, they came in with that particular sound, right? And I knew that it was something special. But I was still trying to figure out how can I make this be part of my lived experience, right? I knew that I was coming out of prison and I had to do something about that, right? And ultimately, it made me start thinking about another particular situation, right? That I had a particular responsibility, right? I was still a little ghetto boy. I was still growing up in these ghetto streets around here. I was still marginalized, right? I still had to figure out how to take this ghetto genius of hip hop, claim it and make it my own, right? So I started thinking about ghetto genius and hip hop. I started pondering like Dr. Dre was doing in this narrative right here, right? Trying to figure out how these streets were gonna make sense to me in a de-industrializing nation. How it's gonna take the creativity of hip hop to address the chaotic situation of my marginalized space. How is it gonna take that cultural wealth that I knew existed, that happened way before Dr. Dre and I ever existed? We had to take that and figure out how to say, you know what? These streets ain't gonna eat me. We're gonna take this thing to the next level and make it be and make it do what it needs to do, right? We had to figure out, right, that technology is not gonna happen based on the next big gadget or things like that. The next big thing is a kid that recognizes how to take that moment, right? Take that moment and iterate something new and something different because of that particular lived situation. That's the power and the spirit of ghetto genius, right? You take that creativity, you take that cultural wealth, and you turn it into something else. You become much bigger than that particular situation. Now, what we knew also was that this is not something that just started with hip hop. This actually goes back to a woman by the name of Sarah Breedlove, who was actually one of the first self-made millionaires in this country, the first female self-made millionaire, right? She understood that in her particular scenario, hair care was an issue. And she had a lived experience as a result of that, right? And she knew other women also in her community had that same particular situation, right? Hair breakage, She figured out concoction to figure out how to repair that. But she also created an education program to spread that knowledge, that wealth. Her cultural wealth became so strong, she changed her name from Sarah Breedlove to actually Madam C.J. Walker, right? And she built a company based on the empire of that particular knowledge and that particular wealth. So it's exciting when you start thinking about individuals like Candace Mitchell and Chanel Morton, where they actually took that same spirit of Madam C.J. Walker and actually took their technical degrees today, their computer engineering degrees and their chemistry degrees, and creating a new company called Texturize, and building a company based on that cultural wealth that Madam C.J. Walker did. And they also started their own education program called the STEM Hair Care Academy. That's exciting to me when they start talking about, we're going to teach young people technology through beauty. So they took that lived experience, they took that cultural wealth, that ghetto genius of Sarah Breedlove, right? But it's other individuals also like Lojo, right? Lojo is an amazing ghetto genius, right? He's the kid that was in the neighborhood that every time you would see him, he'd have a bike rim one minute. Then you see him with a motorcycle battery the next. Then he had a car steering wheel and then some fur. By the end of the day, he's taken a tandem bike and turned it into a limousine that actually had a key that had an alarm on it that worked, that also had a sound system on it that bumped. And I'm like, man, how in the hell did you do that, right? And we're all talking about, man. He said, man, I don't know. It's what I do. I'm like, no, bro, you're a genius, man. But he's right there in our marginalized space. He was a ghetto genius. And he's always been the inspiration of my work. But he started doing something even more exciting to me here recently. Right? Remember I talked about boom boxes? Well, Joe, being a hip hopper, he now is making these boom boxes. Yeah, man. He said, now I just found something in the neighborhood. I just made a boom box out of a suitcase. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, and then I put some yard lights on it. I got out the garbage can and made it solar powered. I'm like, man, see, I said, would you stop calling me with this stuff because you're cracking me up and this is amazing. He said, yeah, and it'll play for 8 hours too. I said, okay, and it's Bluetooth. I'm like, man, so I'm like, Joe, I'm like, man, you're amazing, right? And so in my class, Decoding Dr. Dre, it's a Tech 398 course, I said, you know, I said, this is inspiring. I want to show my students this. I want to show exactly how you take this cultural wealth, this ghetto genius, and how we can expand on that. So I have individuals that are in my class that have actually taken this technology and these Bluetooth boom boxes and building new technology and iterating their own ideas. One kid in particular that's at the forefront is Tim Kline. Tim Kline had a boom box that he built. He's from the suburbs of Chicago. And he was on the quad one day, so some of my students were out testing, because not only were we doing the boom boxes, we're also doing RC cars. So they were out testing the cars and doing the boom boxes on the quad. And they said, hey man, you should come to class and bring your boom box to class. So he brought his version of the boom box to class. He saw the suitcase. He started hanging out in class like he was actually taking a class. He wasn't even registered. But here's what's exciting about that, folks. Here's what you have to remember. Geekism is geekism, and it doesn't matter where you're from, right? It's about where you're at. Think about what Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine did, right, with Beats Audio. Jimmy Iovine said he didn't even like hip hop, right? But he said when he heard how Dr. Dre mixed The Chronic, he said, man, I want to be down with you because I love what you did in that mix. Dre was standing on the cultural wealth of ghetto genius. He knew the algorithms of sound based on those particular narratives. He understood what Jam Master Jay was doing and Grandmaster Flash was doing. So he knew what to do when it came down to mixing it up, right? So I want you to think about yourself being like that, right? I want you to think about how you could actually become and step into this lived experience, how you could actually tap into cultural wealth in spaces like Chicago State University, who people talk about how they're actually struggling because of their financial situations, right? But what Chicago State University has is tremendous cultural wealth, right? We have a project going on right now in my Hip Hop Informatics class that's actually called Southside Cool, where we're looking at the cool technology that's based on the South Side of Chicago and how we use the space and the place of Chicago State University to be that particular hub for that content. They have an archive over there. They have amazing cultural wealth from authors like Lerone Bennett Jr., Gwendolyn Brooks. But here's something else they have. They have the archived records of Providence Hospital, the first African-American-owned hospital in the US. They have that content in their archives. Can you imagine what we could learn within the context of bioengineered medicine from those records? We can make things happen within those particular contexts. Think about the work of individuals like Michael Manson. Michael Manson is a tremendous recording artist, right? He does the damn thing every day when we start looking at how he's working with young people on the south side of Chicago and teaching them the musical legacies of the African-American experience. Here's the cultural wealth that he has and being a ghetto genius that he didn't even recognize and started talking to him about it. Michael was also the music director for two music greats, George Duke, that just passed away, and also Al Jarreau. If you know their work, George Duke is a jazz funk fusionist, and Al Jarreau is a jazz R&B fusionist. Each one of them gave Michael a particular responsibility and a message before they passed away. They said, Michael, George Duke said this, you got to keep the funk alive. Al Jarreau said, Michael, you got to keep the legacies alive. So Michael now wants to build a STEM project based on those particular lived experiences, those particular narratives. Think about how we could build a cultural STEM project within the context of Ghetto Genius and help Michael do that work, to leverage that particular context to keep that narrative going and how that can be flipped. Think about the work that individuals like Chance the Rapper is doing right now and how he's changing the game, right? Chance the Rapper is dealing with what the South Bronx was dealing with back in the 70s. Underfunded educational programs. What did he do with his own cultural wealth? He gave $1 million to Chicago public schools, did he not? Right? Give it up, you gotta give it up for him. That's real, right? Right? His cultural wealth is so strong, right, that now the Chicago Bulls gave $1 million also. Now that's power. That's ghetto genius. That's the cultural wealth of the Ghetto Genius Paradigm, right? So I want you to think about a couple things. How you can also become a visionary like I did in terms of being a connector. Y'all like that avatar, don't you, right? I'm like this Black Professor X, you feel me? Because I'm looking for all the ghetto geniuses I can find, right? I'm the connector, man. Hey, I see it. I talk to folks all the time about your cultural wealth and how we can leverage that. Right? I want you to think about how you take the skill sets that you have and you work with folks like Chance the Rapper and help him figure out what to do with Chicago public schools and after-school programs. I want you to connect with me when you think about how we could take what's happening in the Boys and Girls Clubs and become part of the cultural wealth that's happening at the Boys and Girls Club. I want you to be intentional and be inspired by projects like Southside Cool that we're doing in our Hip Hop Informatics class, the things that we're doing right here, right now at the U of I. I want you to think about the South Bronx. I want you to think about what they did. I want you to think about the culture they created because of those policies that were poor, that didn't give a damn about them. I want you to think about the cultural wealth of hip hop. I want you to think about how Dr. Dre sold that company for $3 billion and it keeps changing the game, right? I want you to think about how we make a ghetto genius universe and how you become a connector within it, right? I'm Dr. Will Patterson. I'm a connector in the ghetto genius universe. Peace.